The other aspect of Star Wars that's happening right now is George Lucas has emerged from his cryogenic sleep to give his opinions on the proxy fight that's going on for Disney board seats right now. And Nelson Peltz has a chance to get one or two board seats here that might actually alter the course of Disney and stop them producing absolute garbage and maybe start getting back to profitability. And I guess that didn't sit well with George. And he said, no, I back Iger all the way. You should definitely support him. Nothing to do with the fact that I'm a majority shareholder in Disney or anything. Maybe Iger's got some kind of clause that lets him take control of my shares, but whatever. And it just felt like, wow, that's really just another nail in the coffin right there. When George Lucas, of all people, is going to support the guy who absolutely destroyed his favorite IPs. You know, the things that he created and built up over decades. I don't even know what to say to it, really. It's an interesting choice.
I don't think George gives a fuck anymore.
Yeah, that's kind of what I think. I don't think he gives a fuck. Like, I think that he let go of Star Wars when he sold it. He was probably pretty disappointed those first couple of years, and after that, he really just the reason he sold is because he didn't want to make any more movies. You know what I mean? Because it was just he wanted to spend time with his family, didn't want to be stressed out, didn't want to worry about that shit. And to me, the idea of Nelson Peltz getting on the board has always been like a very far-fetched thing for me. Period. And then to put on top of that, if he does get one or two seats on the board, they're still surrounded by Bob Iger yes men. So I think it might slow some things down, but I don't know how much it'll really change when it comes to Disney. And I think George is just looking at business. His guys are probably looking at business wide and say, hey, it's probably just better to back Bob Iger. This probably isn't going to have too much of effect anyway, and it's probably steadier for your shares. That's my guess. The one thing I take issue with in the George Lucas issuing that statement was basically one of the first things it said, creating magic is not for amateurs. That was the only thing that kind of bothered me with George's statement. The whole thing's a big PR thing. That is the most antithetical to George Lucas thing to say. This is the guy who went outside of normal Hollywood. This is the guy who's been encouraging fan films for so long. This is the guy who wanted nothing to do with the big corporate structure of Hollywood for so long before selling Star Wars to them. For him to say, creating magic is not for amateurs is so silly. Because if that was the case, we never would have got Star Wars. Do you know what I mean?
Well, Ryan, I'm saying
but creating magic is also not for retards. But Disney, it hasn't stopped them.
That's their political line. That trailer that they released, their propaganda trailer of "Don't vote for the Treon Group, vote for them." They're painting them as amateurs. So George saying it's not for amateurs is like an echoing of that statement. That all these guys don't know what they're doing, even though they have $3 billion worth of stock. And yeah, George, I think the reason it's so shocking is because he did make that comment about he sold his stuff to white slavers. He called them, that he felt betrayed, but apparently not enough to fully trust anyone else with what's left of the money Star Wars is still making.
Yeah, and regardless, again, I think we probably take it more personally than George does in some ways, what has happened to Star Wars.
Yeah.
He's known a lot of these people for decades and decades, and at the end of the day, I don't know if you guys have seen George lately. He's getting old.
That picture that they showed of him, he looks rough. He looks frail now.
He looks old, and I've seen pictures of him walking lately, and he looks old. And I just think this isn't a guy who's ready to sit down and have a fucking battle or stir shit up. He's literally done all he's wanted to do in life and just wants to kind of relax. And was probably asked to, put out a statement and back Bob Iger. Bob Iger probably called him and said, "Hey, do you mind doing this?" He's like, "Okay."
I was gonna say, I wish he had said nothing, but then that's it. They probably asked him, and he just said yes. He said okay.
Why can't he be like? Why can't he? Yeah, why can't he go the William Shatner road, right? It's like, I'm old as fuck, I'm rich as fuck, I don't have to care about anything anymore, I'm just going to speak my mind. That's what I do. Because that's how you're going to be remembered. You can either be remembered as the guy who stood up for what was right and spoke his mind and was honest and fair and truthful at the end, or you can be a fucking pussy who sold out when you didn't need to sell out. You're already like a billionaire. It's not like you ever have to worry about money for the remainder of your time on this earth, or your children or your dependents or anything. They're going to be set for life. Why not just be honest? Why not just say, yeah, these guys fucked up my IP. I built this in my lifetime and they've destroyed it in a decade.
Well, if you remember in Bob Iger's book he wrote, there was something in there that he asked George not to say anything bad about the movies. Like he asked him not to publicly say anything bad about it, just to, for the health of Star Wars and all that stuff. And a lot of people have brought up, well, we might have an NDA or he might have a non-disparagement clause and things like that. I don't think he has a non-disparagement clause. I just think he's also the owner of all this shit too, or he's got a lot of money in there. And I think he just thinks, let's just let it be and give it my kids whatever I got left when I pass away.
You know what I would do then? Like if you just want a quiet life, I wouldn't have said anything.
But he was probably asked, like they said,
wouldn't have come out in support of Peltz or of Iger. I would have just said, you know what? I'm an old man and it's not my business anymore. I'm just going to chill. Fine. Like it's still a pussy move, but at least you're not like actively supporting the people that destroyed your fucking life's work.
They're still making money though.
But who cares? Like when you're 80 years old, what does money fucking matter? When you're already like a billionaire, what more can you achieve?
Remember, it's worth keeping in mind as well. He feels a little bitterness toward people's reaction to the prequels, right? Like, a lot of people explain that's part of why he was happy to sell it. He was like, yeah, someone else can have a go, I guess. And then seeing, there's all kinds of memes like, it's not so easy, is it? When they started to tank in terms of their reputation. But at the same time, maybe he really did, like Ryan said, sort of say goodbye, let it go, and he doesn't think about it the same way we do. Like, how long has it been since he signed now?
Well, okay, fine. So, like, I would equate this to, like, I don't know, like I've got my house, right, and I tried to build like a fucking summer house in my back garden, and it was a bit shit, and my neighbor laughed at me. Like, okay, that made me feel bad. Then I got a builder in to fix it, and he set my house on fire and took a shit in my living room, and and like bulldozed my entire property. That thing is way worse than what I did. It's way worse than the reaction I got to what I tried to do. So I don't like that construction company more than my neighbors.
That comment, Ryan, that you were saying about the amateur, it's not for amateurs. But after he did that Red Tails film, he went on a whole tour bagging the studios because they wouldn't support him, and he had to pay out of his own pocket to make that Red Tails movie. And I think he was on Oprah, he's on everyone, just going on and on about how now the studios support him, they don't understand artists. And then for him to turn around now and say it's not for amateurs is a weird one.
Yeah, that's the only thing that bothers me about the whole statement. And like, again, I could easily see a situation where George is told by his financial advisor, whoever, be like, hey, there's probably not a big chance of Nelson Peltz winning this thing anyway. It's probably just better for stability of the stock, which you own a fuck ton of.
He's the number one individual shareholder. So
exactly. Yeah. So it might be better for the stock if you just say, hey, keep the status quo, because any appearance of infighting might just be worse for us. You know what I mean? Like that's kind of where I think this decision's coming from. And I don't like it. And I would like to think that if I was in the position, I wouldn't do that. But I'm not in that position. I haven't been through all the shit he's been through.
He divorced himself, like you said.
Give it time, Ryan. We'll get you on the Disney board.
Yeah. It's the last nail in the coffin, though, for those people that were holding out hope that, because there definitely were people out there who felt this way, that somehow George Lucas was going to come riding in on a fucking white horse, like clad in like shining armor, and he was going to take back control of Lucasfilm, and he was going to put things right. He was going to fix Star Wars.
I never believed
that. Clearly, that's not going to happen. It's never going to happen. He is not the George Lucas that made the OT. He is an old man now, and he's kind of timid and sad, and he's just like wants to live a quiet life. So he is done as a creative force.
He didn't want to do it 12 years ago. He ain't going to do it now. And some people have gaslit themselves. Some people have been gaslit into believing that George Lucas has been waging this secret war, right, against like Kathleen Kennedy and shit. And that never was the case.
I have it, Ryan, I have it on good authority that Kathleen Kennedy is going to get fired within the next few days.
She's never leaving.
I bet you do. We heard it on good authority that The Acolyte was canceled and Leslie Headland was fired too. Somehow that trailer just came out, so I don't know. Don't know what to say.
George backing Dave Filoni, the OG. Back in the day, I had a problem with it. no decisions he's made have ever made me understand that. And worse, it only empowered Dave. George, tell me everything, because you had some meetings. Great. Sorry, Ryan, I shamelessly steal your Dave Filoni impersonation. But, Dave, tell me everything. It's just, I hate everything he's done. He pushes his characters. Again, even George says Ahsoka should have been gone before Order 66 or at Order 66. And yet still, here she is doing everything Luke should be currently doing in Star Wars in live action.
And did that guy win the lotto, Dave Filoni? Right? God.
How? What did he say to George to get him to think that he would? That's what I will never understand. What he saw, what George saw in Kathy, and what he saw in Dave to give them like, here you go.
I was going to say maybe George isn't a great judge of character. He sold his company to Bob Iger. He handed the keys over to Kathleen Kennedy, and people claim that Filoni was his right hand man, even though he's never claimed that. So. Yeah,
and he created Jar Jar Binks. So,
hey, hold up.
This is
Jar Jar slander here.
Yeah. You know what's an interesting thing to consider as well, right? We all, we've criticized Kathleen Kennedy for her management of Lucasfilm and stuff. But the thing is, he hired her. Ultimately, he put her in that position and said, she's the person who's going to succeed me. So, who's the true idiot in this situation? She is a moron, but she just did what she's always done. She's not really surprised anyone with her running of Lucasfilm. George, I guess, made the call to put her in that position and give her that responsibility. I don't know, man.
Maybe she's that
there's
good.
A lot to be said for where do you sit in this chain of events, George?
She blames it all on toxic fans. She's just that good at spinning it. Everything that's wrong with Star Wars is our fault, and they somehow believe it. And I don't know. I don't know how else she's getting away with the consistent failures. You know what I'm saying? On some level.
But like I say, with someone like Kathleen Kennedy, it's okay, clearly she does not have the creative instincts to run a studio like this. She might have been fine as a producer when she was given specific tasks to do, where you're basically just organizing stuff to make a film happen. Okay, fine, you can do that. But when you're suddenly put in charge of a studio and you have to actually map out a creative vision for where this entire franchise is going, that's a very different role. That's a very different set of responsibilities. And a person like George, who's going to select someone to take on a role like that, should have been smart enough to say, she doesn't have that instinct. She is not creative in that way. I don't think I should hire her. I should find someone else who's better suited to this role. But he put her in it anyway. So a lot of this is kind of down to him, I suppose.